everyone. Welcome back to the Morning Grind podcast presented by rotogrinders.com. I'm your host, Stevie TPFL. It's a Thursday afternoon here. Actually, it's probably the morning time because it's getting out so early here with the Morning Grind podcast, but it's for 21st of April here. Nice Thursday slate. We've got a 7-game morning slate that I'll be handling here on the Morning Grind podcast with my co-host, and then Dan will handle the late game slate on the Fantasy Fix podcast. But my co-host today, one of my friends here at RotoGrinders, does a lot of writing here for the incentives program. It's Luis Cards. I think I said it right.
Yeah, you got it right. How's it going?
Oh, man. Another day. Good baseball here on a Wednesday night. You know, as everybody knows, we record this podcast the night before, so you guys could have it up as you're on your way to work or you're doing your morning research. So we're still here on Wednesday night, but, you know, how are you faring so far tonight?
Well, I had Joe Ross, so the blister pretty much ruined my night.
Well, then you were able to research for this podcast pretty early then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you talked to me in chat earlier. I had Marlin stacks everywhere, so I don't know how it all worked out. We'll see if Jimmy Nelson gets the win. If he gets the win, I think I should have a pretty good night, but we'll see what happens. But all right, we got a pretty nice little 7-game slate here in this early slate. We got some good pitching options. We have some pitchers that we want to target. So this is a nice little slate that if you want some action during the day, you can play, I think you can play cash or tournaments. So we'll get it started here with Seattle at Cleveland. Nathan Karns, Cody Anderson on the hill for these two teams. What's your thoughts on the pitchers here?
Yeah, so with this 7-game slate, like you said, we have a lot of pitching to look at, and these two are not necessarily the guys we want to look at. Karns is a guy who's probably better than people realize, but I don't know that with guys like Kershaw and Scherzer and Price, Cueto all available, he's necessarily somebody we want to go with. Anderson, he's not a guy that I want to look at all. Probably looking to target him more than anything.
Yeah, I agree. Anderson, when he has struggled, it's been against lefties. 324 WOBA, almost a 33% hard contact rate since dating back to last season against lefties. And if we're looking at the lineup here for Seattle, projected lineup's going to have a lot of lefties. We're going to see Seager. We're going to see Robinson Cano. Adam Lind is another guy. So I like some of these Seattle bats. Anybody that I didn't mention that you like here?
No, I think you covered the main ones. And another thing to notice is that he's given up 4 home runs already in just 10 2/3. So I think, getting guys like Cano and Lynn in there even Seager are good options. So
what's your thought on some of these Cleveland bats? It's not a team that we really target for bats. We're kind of waiting for Brantley to come back. What's your thought on the Indians here?
I said I didn't necessarily like Karns as a pitcher today, but I don't necessarily like picking on him either. He does have a higher K rate this year than he has shown in the past. His 385 BABIP is probably, going to make his numbers look a little bit worse than he actually is. His fly ball rate is up, though, so maybe a guy like, if you're taking a flyer on a guy like Napoli or some of the fly ball hitters for the Indians, more than likely I'm going to fade them. But if you're going to play GPPs and you're entering multiple lineups, and taking a flyer on guys like that isn't going to hurt you.
What's your thoughts on Lindor? He's a guy that we've targeted a lot this season. He's having a fantastic season. What's your thoughts on him? His price tag $3,600, not ideal, but I think he might be one guy that I think I'll like here for the Indians.
Yeah, I mean, batting third in front of Napoli. He came on the scene last year really strong, and he's continued that success this year. I have no problem going with a guy like that. I mean, even Kipnis, Santana, all these guys that can leave the park, I'm in favor of playing in tournaments. I just don't know that I would go with any of them. Maybe Lindor in cash, and that would be the only guy for cash for me.
Yeah, definitely agree. Swinging on over here to the Dodgers at the Braves. It's extremely hot at Atlanta here. It was really hot on Wednesday. it's just hot in the Southeast. I'm from Florida. It's really hot right now. But we got a pretty hot pitcher coming into this game, and it's Clayton Kershaw taking on the Braves. Matt Wisler, not a guy that's going to be able to contain this Dodgers offense. I really like Kershaw here. I think he's the safest option on the board.
Yeah, hands down he is. I mean, his numbers are pretty crazy as they are right now. He's got like a 145 BABIP. He's not giving up any hits basically or walks to this point. But the Braves aren't really a team that are going to change that. They're sporting they're dead last in WOBA and weighted runs created plus against lefties. So it's bad news for Atlanta in this one.
Now, Wisler on the other side of the hill here really struggles with lefties. Worst pitcher on the slate here against left-handed bats. 55 innings dating back to last year, 413 WOBA, only a 24% hard contact rate, but a 1.96 home run per 9. He's definitely a guy I think you can target, and we have a lot of lefties in this Dodgers lineup that we can target here.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a fly ball pitcher. He's sporting somewhere around a 5 xFIP over 120 innings pitched in the big leagues. Guys like Seager, Gonzo, Utley, Grandal, they're all in play. Grandal you got to watch because catcher on a day game, but they're all in play.
Yeah, I'd actually be shocked if Grandal catches this game after a night game, getting back into a day slate. I think we'll see our boy AJ Ellis catch here for Kershaw, just because day-night games, typically we don't see the catchers catch back-to-back, but wouldn't shock me. Right. So we'll talk about the visiting Dodgers here first. Give me some bats that you like here.
Just those 4 guys are all, even Peterson, your guy, young Jack, he'll be hitting late or, back in the lineup, but like I said, a fly ball pitcher, all those guys, Seager, Gonzo, Utley, Grandal, Peterson, pretty much any lefty in the Dodgers lineup that can go yard. Utley's not necessarily a guy we're looking to go yard, but he's been hitting the ball really well to start the season, so I don't mind him hitting up in the order either. So,
yeah, favorite options here, definitely Adrian Gonzalez. I think he's underpriced across the industry. Only 3,300. He had a home run in Wednesday's game. It was a moonshot. I like him to keep that momentum going here. And like you mentioned, Jock Peterson, man, this is a good matchup for him. Fly ball pitcher. Jock's a guy that has a home run upside. I like him a lot. I think you'll agree with me. I don't think we want to target any of these Braves bats against Kershaw here.
Absolutely not. I think some of these Kershaw numbers are a little better than we're going to anticipate over the course of a season, but this just isn't the team that's going to even that out at all, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely agree. Hot Atlanta to, down south Miami, Washington at Miami for the Marlins. Scherzer against Tom Kohler. Interesting matchup here. It's, Scherzer might be a one-off GPP play to Kershaw because I think a lot of people are going to have Kershaw. What's your thoughts on Scherzer and Kohler in this game?
Yeah, so the Marlins aren't like the Marlins of the past where you can just any right-hander you can throw them against them. I mean, they've got some pretty decent bats. They're actually middle of the road in just about every statistical category that I look at. The main ones being like K percentage, WOBA, weighted runs created plus. They're in the middle of the pack basically on all 3 of those. I really like Scherzer. Even with that said, I mean, this guy is elite. It's kind of tough because we have Scherzer and Kershaw on the same slate. I like it when they're broken up because they're both guys I like to lean on heavily. You can go either way. Kershaw is, for me, by far the number 1 option. But if you're trying to be different, you're probably playing tournaments, and he should have a lower ownership than Kershaw.
Yeah, I agree. Similar upsides. Miami, a team that can strike out. Like you said, though, they've off to a pretty good start. Tom Kohler, on the other hand, has a matchup against Washington, and Washington hit him pretty good on the 10th, but he ended up scoring 30 fantasy points in that game. He's only 6,800. What's your thoughts here on Kohler?
Kohler is one of those guys who is a middle of the rotation guy. It just, that's who he is. He's got a mid to low 4x FIP over his career. He's going to have games where he flashes. He does have a pretty powerful fastball. He's one of those fringe guys. I don't really necessarily like to load up against him. I kind of pick my spots with more elite bats when I can, and at the same time, he's not a guy that I'm looking to throw in my lineups either. So kind of on the fence with him. With Washington, I'd be more inclined to load up against him with guys like Harper and Zimmerman and even Worth, who's swinging the bat hot. I'm not going to be playing Kohler, but I'm not necessarily going to play a ton of guys against him.
For sure. If there's anybody you're targeting, is standout. Harper 6K. It's tough to pay that price tag, but he's had a lot of success against Kohler. 26 at bats. He's hit 5 home runs off him. Some good numbers. It's just Harper, man. It's tough to say not to play him, but if you're fitting in a Kershaw, it's probably going to be really hard to fit in Harper. With that said, Harper's a great play. I like Rendon, I like Zimmerman, and I like Daniel Murphy as well in this game. You like Worth. Is there anybody else that we will need to talk about here for Washington?
I don't think so. I mean, guys are taking a flyer on Taylor if he's hitting up in the order, but I don't think that you necessarily have to do that here with Kohler.
All right, now we're looking at going against Max Scherzer with the Marlins. Hey, look, Derek Dietrich got a start on Wednesday night and hit a home run. Shocking. He hits right-handed pitching very well. Now he'll be in the lineup because Don Mattingly doing Don Mattingly things. Is there anybody that you want to target here against Scherzer?
I mean, if you're trying to be different, then yeah, you can go with the middle of their order, right? Or even their leadoff guy. 1 through 4, I don't mind. If you're trying to be different, you're trying to be different, right? So guys like Gordon, Yelich, Stanton. I mean, even a guy like Pure, Dietrich, obviously, if he's in the lineup, is a guy. I don't think that picking on Scherzer is a good idea, but these are the kind of plays where if the Marlins bats are hot, then they can win you a tournament.
Yeah, and some of these Marlins have had some success against Scherzer, so it's interesting. I'm not against taking some of the bats. Stanton has massive upside against anybody he faces, so always like him. I always think D. Gordon is a guy that is under own every slate, so I don't mind him as well. Tampa at Boston, Jake Odorizzi, David Price. David Price facing his old team in a Red Sox uniform at Fenway this time. What's your thoughts on Price and Odorizzi here?
Yeah, so Price is one of my favorite pitchers in the league. I think we've talked about this in the past when the Cardinals missed out on him and the Red Sox got him. Our two teams. He's been great. He's sporting, I think, a 36.5% K rate, over 18 innings on the year, somewhere around a 2x FIP. He's looked nasty, and even in Fenway against the Rays, I don't mind him at all. I think he's the number 3 option on the day, and we were talking about how it might be interesting to play Scherzer in a tournament. I really think it's interesting to play Price because he might really get overlooked in this slate.
Yeah, I actually have him ranked above Scherzer. I think he's my number 2. Kershaw, clear number 1 for me. I agree with you there. I just like Price a lot here. He's able to neutralize right-handed bats for the most part. That's what he's going to see a lot in this lineup. And you have to think that he's going to get pumped to face his old team. With that being said, I think he's in a good spot to rack up some strikeouts here in this game. And he looked really good finally in that last game against Toronto, another one of his former teams. So it is what it is, and I like Price here. Odorizzi's a guy that's interesting to me as well. He's shown strikeout rate. He's averaging over a strikeout per inning this season. That kind of lines up with what he's been used to doing. I just don't know if I like him here against the Red Sox at Fenway. Yeah,
it looks like he's abandoned his 2-seamer this year, and that is kind of interesting because it wasn't really that bad of a pitch for him. The one thing that I will say is he's a fly ball pitcher, so in Fenway you got to watch out for that. The Boston bats are obviously pretty prolific. There's some pretty prolific hitters there, and he's one of those guys one of the few guys who truly profiles as a reverse splits guy over his career. With any given a good sample in any given year, he's been a reverse splits guy. So he's not a guy I like to put in my lineups. And actually, I think I'm probably going to have a couple of Boston players in my lineup. Probably, Ortiz, the Betts, and I think Hanley Ramirez is kind of one of those guys that's lying in the weeds. He's just dying to hit one of these, multi-home run games that he has. I think Hanley Ramirez is a guy that I really like today for tournaments.
Yeah, I like Hanley too. He's always an interesting option because he's first base eligible on FanDuel. So then you have to decide between, do I take Ortiz? Do I take Hanley? Who do I want in my stack? Most of the people will go Ortiz. We see that night in and night out. And not saying that's a bad play, but it usually leaves lower ownership for a guy like Hanley. So you can play him one-off. You can play him in part of the stack to try to be different with your Red Sox stack. I like him here, like you mentioned, Odorizzi, a guy that has the reverse splits, dating back to the start of last year, almost a 32% hard contact rate to right-handed bats. Hanley's a guy you want to target. Mookie Betts is a guy you want to target. I don't know how I feel necessarily about targeting guys like Pedroia, but I continue to talk about this guy on the podcast, and I really like Travis Shaw. I think he's the real deal. And third base eligible, only 2,900. I think he's a cash game play here.
Yeah, and the thing about Shaw is he's come up big late in games too. Our boy Dean, he would say he's very clutch. He's come up, I think, in the ninth inning. He's got a couple of RBI already on the season in the ninth inning. So, I mean, he's proven that he can do the job. Don't hate that play at all.
All right, now looking at the Rays against Price, I don't want anything to do with these bats. Is there anybody that stands out to you here against Price?
No, I mean, I'm not going to be targeting Price at all. But if you are going to be, if you're not a believer, then obviously you're looking at guys like Longoria and Souza, right? Because Longoria is a guy that hits left-handed pitching, as is Souza Jr. Both have decent upside. I mean, it's David Price, so it is what it is. You're taking a risk there, but those are the only two that you want to take a risk with, I believe.
Yeah, I think if you're going to take a risk, you may want to throw Forsythe in there as well. He hits left-handed pitching really well. Coming off a couple good games, it's just not a risk that I think I'm going to take here on a 7-game slate. But if you do, it is what it is. Swinging on over Minnesota at Milwaukee. Great ballpark to target hitters here. Not necessarily the pitchers, and luckily for us, we got Youngman and Nolasco. Not pitchers that you're pretty much going to want to target ever. And the thing about Nolasco is major reverse splits dating back to last year. We didn't get to see him a lot last year. And, I think this is a good matchup to target some of the Brewers, and I think it's a good matchup to target some of the Twins here. What's your thoughts on the pitchers and the hitters here?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I think the pitchers are toast in this one. You want to target hitters from both sides. Nolasco has been pitching way over his head, in my opinion. For a guy that with such a low K percentage, and his ground ball rate is way up, his hard hit percentage is way down. I just don't think that he can sustain what he has been doing thus far on the season. And, while Milwaukee is not necessarily a team that I love the bats from, at the same time, I'm probably going to have some exposure to guys like Braun, Carter, maybe even in the tournament, guys that can do some damage, with one good at bat. And over his career, he's been a pretty bad pitcher to left-handed hitters too. I mean, he's somewhere around a 340 WOBA, so there's always that as well.
Yeah, we'll start it off with the Brewers bets since you mentioned like Braun and Carter. I think you can plug in Scooter Jeanette.
Hmm.
In the 2 spot, only 3K second base eligibility on FanDuel. I think he's a good play. Um, Outside of that, if one of these cheap outfielders maybe get a bump towards the top of the order, I don't think Lucroy would be in the lineup. Catcher coming off of a night game, they're playing an extra inning game on Wednesday night, so or no, not an extra inning game, but yeah, but they're playing a late game here on Wednesday night. I just don't see Lucroy being in the lineup. So be careful with that. Make sure he's playing if you do target him. And then let's talk about some of the Twins here. I think Youngman's a guy that we can target with lefties and righties. Not a guy that really scares me too much. He does have some strikeout upside, but that's not going to be a reason that I don't target some of these hitters.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got about 100. He's about 130 innings in to his career, and he's got a 4.12 xFIP with a 20% K rate, somewhere around there. And the interesting thing about him is he's giving up a 320 or so WOBA to left and right-handed hitters. So, you're not necessarily only looking to the lefties. Another thing about him is he has a pretty big fly ball spike versus right, as well as his home run per fly ball rate spikes a little bit against right. So a guy like Sano is somebody that I'm looking at heavily in this one.
Yeah, I agree. Sano's pretty much the target that I'm going to have here. They kind of mix around the top of the order quite a bit for the Twins. Escobar is up there 1 game. Nunez is up there 1 game. So if you get a cheap option towards the top of the order in cash games, I think that might be somewhere you want to look. But for the most part, it's a no for me. I hear a lot of talk about Dozier. I don't hardly ever play this guy. Do you like Dozier here in this game?
Not really. I mean, he's not off to the greatest start, I don't believe. Well, Minnesota as a whole has not been, so I doubt. I don't think he has either. He's just not a guy that profiles very well, or as well as I think his hype is over the course of the past few seasons. No, I think my main target is Sano. I am interested to see who they lead off with. Nunez is a guy that I don't mind playing. I wish Mauer had a little bit more power because he's been hitting the ball very well. It's just his home run upside is limited, almost to the point where he's unplayable. But he's an interesting option if you're looking to get a couple of extra base hits. That's kind of what he needs to do to get you where you need to be.
Yeah, I don't play Joe Mauer. I've said that so many times on the podcast and Grinders live shows. It's just there's no upside with him. His upside is like 15 points. If he scores you 15 points at 3K, it's probably not the worst thing. But just not a lot of upside for a guy like Mauer, like you said. He hits the ball very well. He's like the king of 6.9 point fantasy games. If he was a catcher on FanDuel or on DraftKings, we'd probably play him every day. But not the case for first base. No upside. Angels at White Sox. This is a barn burner here. We got 2 massive slow ball pitchers here, John Tanks and Weaver. I think the average velocity for these 2 pitchers is probably going to be like 88 miles an hour, 89, 90, 91 at the most. What's your thoughts on Weaver and Tanks here?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, Weaver's K percentage is just sinking to some pretty incredibly low numbers here. I think he's sitting around 10 this year, and after we didn't think it could get much worse after last year or the past couple of years. The problem is both these offenses have not necessarily done enough to make us want to take either one. The Angels are a team that I like to stack a lot, but it just hasn't come through this year. They're a team that actually won me quite a bit of money last year because for whatever reason, even they're just so hit or miss that they go under owned just about every single slate. Even on a slate where they're facing John Dinks, I don't think they're going to be very highly owned. So once again, I'll probably have an Angel stack in there. Dinks is a guy with like a 4.6 xFIP over the past 2 years. His K rate's around 15%. Right-handed hitters crush him. it all lines up and it makes sense why you would want to have some Angels. It's just a struggle outside of Trout to who do you really trust? And even Trout this year, who do you trust on the Angels to get you the hits?
Yeah, I think we can mention Pujols. Like you said, not Pujols is so up and down. He's hard to roster, but in a tournament, if you're playing Kershaw in a GPP or you're playing, Price or Scherzer, you're paying over 10K for these pitchers. You got to find upside for, Price, and Pujols at 3,200. He presents some upside. I like Escobar in this game. He's a guy that I love targeting against left-handed pitchers, and he just continues to get the job done against lefties, batting at the top of the order. It's been like the one bright spot for this offense this year has been Escobar, and I think he's a good play here. And really, outside of that, like you said, Trout's always in play. Trout against the lefty, just in seasons past, we would just lock it in, but he's off to a shaky start this season as well. I want to mention, the catcher Soto. If he's in the lineup, he's 2,400. He hits left-handed pitching very well. So I think he's in play if he starts. It'd be interesting to see if he starts, though.
Yeah, I really like the Escobar play that you mentioned. Like you said, he does hit left-handed pitching pretty well, leading off for the Angels. He's got pop, so he can actually go yard even from the leadoff spot. That's a great play on this slate, especially on sites where he's cheap. So really like that play.
Now, looking at the other side of things here, Weaver is a guy we can target. He pitches the contact. Like you mentioned, his strikeout rate is gone. There's no such thing as Weaver, striking out a bunch of people. Really struggles with lefties. Instantly, the first person I think of in this lineup that's a lefty is Adam Eaton, top of the order. Another cheap guy, 2,900. So if you're playing a guy like Kershaw, I think Eaton is a guy that's going to be really popular here on this slate.
Yeah, both the leadoff guys are in play from this game. Another one, you got Melky sitting in the 5-hole. He's not a terrible option here against Weaver, who, like you said, is going to have batters hitting it in play. Abreu, another guy, obviously, with the tremendous power. And Brett Lawrie is a guy that is interesting. He seems to be starting to put it together a little bit. For those of you that might not know, he was pretty hyped up from the Blue Jays a while back when he was coming up. And then he got a couple injuries. He didn't really pan out, and now he's kind of faded into oblivion. That is the White Sox. And this year he's had some really good at-bats. The stats might not be mind-blowing, but he's shown some progression to being somewhat of that hitter that we might have expected him to be. So I kind of like him as a sneaky play on just about any slate where the pitcher on the other side isn't that great.
Yeah, the thing that I like about him, for the most part, is he's playing every day now. So, that always helps the hitter out. I think we have to mention Jose Abreu, 3,400 against Weaver. Like we continue to say, Weaver just not a big strikeout guy anymore. Jose Abreu hasn't shown a lot of flashes of a bunch of power here this season, but he's still a guy that, we have to look at 3,400 in this matchup. And Todd Frazier, 3,700. I think I like some other third basemen more than I like Frazier. What's your thoughts on Frazier here?
Man, Frazier is one of those guys I just never get right. He's so streaky. I know people don't believe in streaks in baseball, but I really do, and I honestly think he's one of the most streaky hitters in the entire league. He'll go, it seems like, an entire month where he can't even hit the ball. The beat writers are making fun of him on Twitter, and then the next thing you know, the whole next month he's hitting dingers every other day. So, man, he's just boom or bust. I never get him right, and for the time being, I'm fading him. I kind of wait until he hits a home run or two, and then I pick my spots where I like the pitcher he's facing. That's not necessarily the most sound advice in DFS, I guess you would say, but that's how I treat Todd Frazier and always have, really.
All right, last game we got on this early slate here: Arizona at San Francisco. Johnny Cueto, Shelby Miller. I was on the Shelby Miller death train the other night against the Padres, where he lacerated his finger, pitched 1 2/3 innings. I don't think I'm going to be targeting him here against a team that is really good against right-handed pitching. Top 3 team last year was the Giants. I want nothing to do with Miller, but I think Cueto's interesting in tournaments. I think he'll be very underowned with all these other pitchers on the slate, and Cueto's 3-0, fitting in with the Giants' winning ways, and I think he'll have run support. What's your thoughts on Miller and Cueto here in this game?
Yeah, so first, let me hit up on Miller. Miller is a guy that you want to take in a hitter's park, or in a pitcher's park, I'm sorry, which we have here. I mean, you could pitch him here, except for the fact that the Giants are a left-handed hitting team, which is exactly what you don't want to do against Miller. So you need a right-handed hitting team in a pitcher's park to pitch Shelby Miller, which is unfortunate since now he's in Arizona. Pretty much every home game is a game where you don't want to pitch him, and this is absolutely, like you said, a game you don't want to pitch him with the bats that they have on the Giants. As far as Cueto, I agree with you. He's the clear top four. We're going Kershaw, Scherzer. You have Price above Scherzer. I have Scherzer just above Price, and then Cueto for me. Arizona is a dangerous team. They have plenty of guys that can go yard. I mean, from both sides of the plate. But it's Johnny Cueto, and he's in the NL again, and a good ballpark for him. He should have plenty of run support. I think he is able to contain the Diamondbacks here. And on 2 and 3 pitcher sites, Cueto is a guy that I really think you should be leaning on if his price is right.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So let's target some of the bats here. We'll start with the Diamondbacks on the road at San Francisco. We're not necessarily looking for home runs here because this ballpark's, very friendly for pitchers, but you can easily hit a ball into Tripper's alley and get an easy triple here. I say easy, it's never easy, but any bats that you want to take here against Cueto from Arizona?
I mean, if you're not with me on having Cueto in the multi-pitcher sites, then, a guy like Peralta, a guy like Lamb, even Segura leading off. He's a guy that has performed pretty well to start the season. He had a really hot spring and it carried over into the season. I think I've talked to you before the season about him. I really liked him as a bounce-back guy in Arizona this year. But with that said, I won't have any of those 3 guys. But if you are not with me on Cueto, then those are the guys you should be looking at. Obviously, Goldie is a guy you can play against anybody. So I don't think I need to mention him, but I will.
Yeah, it should be very underowned here on this 7-game early slate. A lot of people paying up for pitching. We mentioned first basemen's in the 3 to 3,000 to 3,300 range. I don't see a lot of people paying up for Goldschmidt on this slate. Might be a sneaky tournament play. Now, looking at Miller on the other side of things here, I think that we have some options. I'll give you first crack at some of the Giants here.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite under-owned first baseman, just about, it seems like all the time, is Brandon Belt, right? He's a lefty. That's what you want to target Miller with. He's hitting probably 4th in the lineup here. And even in San Francisco, he's got the ability to go yard. He's not a guy that's going to hit 40 home runs in a season, but what he does is he comes through with extra base hits. It seems like every single time he's in a good matchup. So Brandon Belt, and then I'll go with Denard Span leading off. Obviously, another lefty. He's got some speed. Those are the 2 that I'll give you, and then I'll let you finish up with whatever you got.
Yeah, I like Span as well. Belt, like you said, another first baseman in that price range to fit in guys like Kershaw. I like Belt as well. And just one other name that I want to mention here is Panic. I love him hitting the 2 spot. 3,200 is not the ideal price for him, but it's still not high enough where I'm not going to play him. So I think he's an interesting option as well. Posey, it'd be interesting to see if Posey's in the lineup or not, because they'll probably want to keep Belt in there against the lefties, so I'm sure he'll be in there. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. Man, that's pretty much wraps it up here for this morning slate. Let's play some home run derby. I don't know if you know what's going on with this, but we're going to play a snake style draft. We take 3 guys. You'll go first. I'll take 2. You'll take 2, and then I'll finish it up. But we're going to stick to this morning slate only. And you got first pick, man. You're up.
Okay. Let's see here. I'll go with Sano.
Sano it is. It's an interesting one there. I don't think a lot of people will be on Sano. I'm going for the double dip here. Adrian Gonzalez and Jock Peterson. I think that the Dodgers, like the warm weather here in Atlanta and get some home runs in this game. And then I'll let you finish up with your 2 picks.
Yeah, I thought I could get away with not going Gonzo there. I'll go Harper. And then I'll go with, who do we want here? You know what? I'll go with Pujols.
All right, not a bad idea. I'm going to round it out with a guy that I kind of agreed with you. I think Hanley's in a good spot today. I think he's going yard, and I'll round it up with Hanley Ramirez. Last segment of the show. So this is not necessarily the highest scoring pitcher on the slate, but it's a pitcher that you think is going to get a win here. Could be anybody you think is just going to end with a win in their column at the end of the day. Who do you got?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Cueto if I'm picking a guy to get a win.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. I think that they get to Miller. Cueto off to a 4-0 start would be a great thing for the Giants. Kershaw would definitely be a guy that I think will pick up the win, but
I felt like that was cheating.
No. Yeah, that's why I'm not calling Kershaw, but I'm going to go with my boy, man. I'm going to go with David Price in this game. I see David Price picking up the win here and being one of the highest scoring fantasy players as well. Andrew, it's always a pleasure to work with you. People can find you on Twitter at Louis Cards, correct?
Yes, Louis Cards, not Louis Cards, as Dan likes to call me.
And people can find you writing incentives all over the Roto-Grinders incentives for a bunch of different sites. You do that all the time. You do it very well. Thanks for joining me, man.
No problem. It was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
All right. Guys, we'll be back with the Morning Grind podcast here on the Friday slate tomorrow. And it'll be the normal Friday guy, Hoop 2410 will be joining me. He'll be talking cash games. I'll be talking tournaments. So it's always good time. So make sure you guys check that out. And I'll see you again tomorrow.